What is marriage? Modern marriage is actually times two. The new normal is forcing us to ask questions our parents never had to answer out loud. People are staying, they're leaving, they're co parenting, they're redefining love, and sometimes living in the same house while emotionally standing on opposite sides of the room. If marriage has changed this much, are we still measuring it by the wrong rules? And how is this affecting our children? Welcome to Call Me Auntie, our new series on community talks where the village is talking. I'm Yvonne, and I'm super glad that you are joining us today. So pull up a chair. Let's talk. Today, we're talking about modern marriage, the new normal, the complicated normal, the we're together, but are happy or maybe not normal because we're together for the children. Around the kitchen table, people are whispering things they're afraid to say in public, and we don't fight, but we don't love each other. We're staying for the kids. Is marriage still marriage if it looks nothing like what our elders taught us? So today we're not here to judge. We're here to sit under the tree, tell the truth, and ask, what does commitment look like now? And under our proverbial tree, we have Amanda. She's a relationship and advice and a community voice. So before we get into today's topic, Amanda, welcome to my kitchen and tell everybody why this topic has got you interested.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I feel like this topic, oh my gosh, I got into this because I was a girl who I got pregnant at 18 and started off my marriage rather rough beginning. I will say that. We struggled financially to you're not taught relational skills in school. So I'll just start there. Like, you're not taught these relational skills growing up. And I honestly don't think that most of us were taught relational skills from our parents. Nowadays, we want these passionate relationships. And as we were going through the first several years of marriage, I knew that I wanted an incredible relationship of having. And my husband was a very, like, one of those, he didn't talk, he had no emotions, yes, yes. And if we look at, I mean, patriarchy, right? Patriarchy. Um,
Mm.
Men are taught they get to have anger and lust, and to be a man, you have to show no emotion. And so then as women, we are taught and conditioned from a very young age to put everyone else's needs and wants and desires ahead of our own. And a lot of us watched our parents either live parallel lives where the mom overfunctions, the dad kind of does whatever he wants, or he goes to work and provides and comes home and sits down on the couch and does whatever he wants. And so that's what was modeled
Newspaper
to
in
us.
hand.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's just so interesting to look at my marriage. And I remember hitting that 7-year mark, and I was like, I am over it. I cannot keep doing it this way. I I had a teacher in school tell me, she's like, fine. And that was not the case. That was not the case. 7 years came and went, and that's when I realized, no, I actually might have to put some effort into this or changing something because this isn't working for me anymore. I'm doing everything around the house. I'm doing everything to take care of the kids. I'm taking care of the yard. My husband goes to work and comes home, and that was it. And I was like, listen, I'm not going to keep doing this. We have to figure something out. And
Mm.
that was kind of where my journey began and why I became so passionate about this, because now 19 years in, things are so much better. So much better.
Amanda, thank you so much for sharing that. Um, Let me start here. A lot of people grew up seeing marriages as simple. You meet somebody, you marry, you stay. But now we're seeing all sorts of different ideas around marriage. You see things like partnership, co-parenting, blended families, separate rooms. I remember that I had a friend when I was teaching, and she came into the staff room one day and she said, "My husband and I have decided to sleep in separate rooms because he snores." And everybody went like, "Disaster." But they're still together. So there's that side of the coin, but then there's the emotional distance, or where sometimes two people, who are still legally married, but spiritually there's nothing. That modern marriage is the new normal. And because as a relationship coach, you speak to some to say about the kind of state of the nation of modern marriage.
Yeah, I feel like modern marriage, I mean, the way that I view modern marriage is women want connection. We want passionate relationships. We want a partner who actually participates in the life that he helped create. And maybe some people take modern marriage as like feminism, and I think that we do need some of that. But over the years, women have evolved. Women have stepped back into the workforce. Women have started participating in providing for the homes and also recognizing the invisible labor that they've been doing all along. And so to me, modern marriage is more like we want the relationship to feel good for both people, not just the woman, not just the man, but also the man coming home and participating and cooking and cleaning, not your traditional marriage roles that we all grew up seeing, because this is how I always explain it for especially even a stay-at-home mom. She thinks, well, I stay at home, this is my job. Well, yeah, that is your job. You have a 9 to 5, just like your husband has a 9 to 5. And then in the evenings, it's up to both of you to cook dinner, to do bedtime, to finish picking up the house, whatever didn't get done during the day, to finish laundry if that's what didn't get done, the outside chores. There's so much more to it. There's grocery shopping, right? There's meal planning. There's the mental side of all of these tasks that come into play. And when a woman is carrying not only the household during the day, but the household all night too, that's a 24/7 role. So modern marriage is essentially that they created, and the man not thinking that, well, I provide, I get to come home and rest, because that's your typical. A lot of the interesting thing is, if we look at it, not a lot of men have evolved over the last 50 years in the way that women have. Women have really evolved. We're not in the 50s anymore. And men have slowly, they want things to stay the same because they benefit the most. They benefit the most from the way that things are.
So is there then that expectation then from a kind of as there, because my first 5 years, well, I have two boys, and my boys in, and for the kind of first 5 years, for my kid, one I was in the UK and I didn't have family, so going to work, all your money went to childcare. It was, that this, for us, it was, do you go to work and your kids still, do not benefit from having their culture, and you advance your career, or do you stay home and then you kind of take care of the kid and then pick up your career later? It was kind of like that. But we didn't have a discussion. It just happened. There was just that, yeah, you're the man, what happened. Do you think there's a resentment that comes from that?
Absolutely. Because I do think that if we look at society as a whole, it's expected of moms. And I do think that resentment comes from that, absolutely, because if there was not a discussion, I mean, and you can tell me if there was resentment on your end towards that whole situation, but I think
I
if you
never
really
I
look
never
at it,
thought about it. Yeah, I never
yeah,
I never thought about it, and until we've had this conversation, and until you've started talking about this, I'm thinking now to myself, I think I might have had some resentment because I was a really ambitious person. I To be honest, there was a point in my life I thought I'd never ever want to have kids. I wanted to be this high flying lawyer and travel all around the world, and then I end up staying at home and taking care of the kids, and then taking a career then kind of evolved around them. So yeah, it's a good question. How about you? Was there any resentment from staying at home?
There was so much
Yeah.
resentment. But I think more of my resentment, and I think this is what it is for a lot of women, because I don't think it was necessarily the resentment that I stayed home. And I stayed home for a short period and then I started a business because I was like, I'm not meant to be a full-time mom.
Yeah, my brain
But
needs to work.
yes, I need something that's like mine. But I think there was more resentment around my husband for not participating, for not he just came home and expected a hot meal on the table and expected sex whenever he wanted and, all of these things. And so I think there was just that expectation on his end. And that's where a lot of my resentment, and I feel like a lot of the women I work with, that's where the resentment is coming from, is not, but the fact that their partners expect them to do everything because that's what we saw growing
Mm,
up. That's what the men saw growing up was an over-functioning mom.
yeah. So there's two sides to this then. Like, are the schools aware, that all around another extra expectation? And then on the other side of that, the kids and the kids that come home and they see mom over functioning, and then they see dad coming home and putting his his legs up reading a newspaper. That was the kind of dad I grew up with. Dad would come home and then he'd sit on the couch and he would read a newspaper. If we look at kind of all the relationships here, right, there's a relationship with us as the moms who then stay at home, and then now the school, and then the kids. you know what do you think the reality is in all of that?
I think that it gets to look how you want it to look, and it gets to feel how
Mm,
you want it to feel. And
mm,
if you are feeling any sort of way towards your husband for doing that, for coming home and kicking his legs up on the couch, I would get really curious
reading a
about that. And I would
newspaper.
ask yourself, yeah, why why am I upset that my husband comes home from work, kicks his legs up, and starts reading the newspaper? And it could be that at the end of the day, you're both tired from working your shift. Kids are
Why
exhausting.
don't you get to
And
sit
so,
on the couch and put your legs out?
yeah. And I think that there's also a lot of conditioning there around women because, again, we saw overfunctioning moms. We think that we can't. We think that we have to keep going, or if we don't get it done, it's just not going to get done. We're often afraid to ask our partners because this was my case. I was afraid he had the same belief that I did, that it was my job to handle the whole house and it was his job to just provide the money. And that's just not the
Mm,
case anymore. Women are waking up and realizing that we want a family guy. We don't
yeah.
want a guy just for his paycheck.
Mm. Do you think in some way though, now this was going to be a little bit controversial and I probably will get a lot of hate for this, but do you think in a way the men could when the kids come home? Could there be any truth in that?
Well, tell me if you stay home and even when your kids are in school, do you kick your legs up and watch the telly? Like, I think there's
To be
that question. I
honest,
mean,
there's sometimes I quite got into Jerry Springer. I don't think he's there anymore, but
I remember Jerry Springer. I think I tried to watch an episode or two. I cannot do like reality TV. So I think there's truth in it that we both get to have that.
hmm.
I do think because typically what happens is during the day, if all the kids are in school, I mean, let's be real, most women have stepped back into the workforce. There are a lot of women who, when the kids go back to school, they do step back into the workforce. But let's just say, for the sake of this, they haven't. They're probably still handling laundry. They're probably still handling cleaning the house. They're probably running errands. They're still tracking what's for dinner tonight. What do we need? What are we getting low on? So I think there's still like an aspect of that that women carry throughout the day. But I think why can't they both kick their feet up at night when he gets
Because the
home?
kids will run amok.
I mean, that is true.
somebody has to, somebody has to make sure dinner's eaten, homework's done.
Right?
Imagine
But I
if
think
both
that's where it
parents did.
falls on
The way
both.
after marriage then come in is honestly maybe a way in which people are trying to communicate. Um, and because maybe it's not always possible for people to see different perspectives, and maybe the compromises or are because of this inability of both sides to be able to fully bring the other ones into how their roles are, and maybe completely do what they want to do. You're kind of like forced by circumstance to do what you do.
Yeah, I think this is where we need a lot more women speaking up. I think my biggest regret in my own
Mm,
relationship was not speaking up sooner. I had a fear,
mm,
and this is typically most women have, if we're looking at and when I describe patriarchy, it's like the patriarchal system, right? Where it
mm,
stemmed from kings and queens and has come all the way down, but we're still kind of living in this era where men have been taught to provide financially and women have been taught to stay home and take care of everything else. And
mm,
under a patriarchal system, women typically have three fears. He'll blow up and attack me, he'll blow up and
mm,
leave, or he will fall
mm,
apart and it's going to be all my fault. And so we kind of have this fear of speaking up because it's like, well, he's going to get pissed and yell at me, or he'll just up and leave, or he's gonna like fall apart. It's gonna be all my fault. He's gonna shut down and go hide, and it's gonna be on me. And so that kind of is where we start to silence ourselves. And what I
mm,
think we need more of is women daring to rock the boat, daring to
mm,
speak up and fight for the relationship that you want. Because right
mm,
now, if we look at them, the men are pretty comfortable. The men are happy to go to work and provide and come home and kick their legs up, and the wife cooks dinner and she handles bedtime and the nightly chaos of homework. And then she's pissed off when they go to bed, and he's happy as a clam
mm.
because he hasn't had to do anything. And I think we,
But are they? So I was having a conversation with somebody, and the wife, ex-wife now, had stayed home for about 10 years. And he had wanted to stay home, but he couldn't, because he was, the bigger earner, the bigger paycheck. And so there wasn't a conversation.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
I think that men,
if
I
a
think a
child
lot,
is growing up and they're watching them mom and dad, in kind of like this situation, right? So let's say there's all this resentment and it's all grown, because they all have their needs not met. And really interesting, what you said there, like the women are afraid of speaking up because, the man might up and go, or he might, or he might blow up, right? Um, you know, if a child is watching this, actually, before I even ask that, is that something we've learned as women, um, or is that something that's innate within us?
no, I think that's something that's learned coming down
Mm,
throughout watching our parents, watching our, even if you're in a religion, a high demand religion, religions fall
mm,
under the same system and teach, women are the support, men provide. Essentially, it teaches men are in control over versus in control with. And we want with nowadays. And so I don't think that it's necessarily innate. I think that it's conditioned into us from a very young age.
so there's some behavioral expectations, um, you know, because you're a woman, this is your expectation that you've learned because you've seen it or because you've been taught.
Both. So
Both.
kids will model behavior that they've seen growing up, and they will also react to their environment. So whatever environment you're put in, you're going to react to it and you're going to model it. So if you watch your kids most often, you'll find, and I'm just going to say this because statistically speaking, moms are typically the more emotionally safe parent because she has more range, right? So kids, they will actually relate to mom. And this is typically a little more gender specific. Like, so the boys will model how dad relates to mom. So if dad comes
Mm.
home and kicks his feet up and doesn't really help around the house, you might find that it's really difficult to get your little boy to do some chores around the house. And maybe you're constantly like nagging him or behavior. to relate to you in the way that dad does. And this is why I
Yeah.
always feel like one of the best things we can do for our kids is I think we put a lot of emphasis.
Old. So let's say parents are staying together, because they're staying together for their children, they're not fighting. Is it going to make it a lot more difficult to model that kind of partnership
Well, I
if you're not
think that
close
if
to,
you're staying
is
together,
it possible?
yeah, I think if you're staying together for your kids already know something's off. Kids don't have internal boundaries, so their nervous systems absorb it all. So even if you think that you're putting up, and the one I've lived through this is how I know this too, but not only have I learned this, not only do studies show this, but when I remembered when my husband and I was like, "Oh, we don't fight. Like, we're fine. Like, the kids are good. I'm really proud of the relationship we're showing our kids." And we went
Oh,
through a phase. We had a 3-month separation where my husband, his drinking got a little out of hand. And I was like, listen, I'm not going to be married to an alcoholic. And we had a separation. And I remember feeling it. However, you're feeling about your husband and the way that he's relating to you, it's probably the same way
oh,
that he's relating to the kids as well. And same for you.
that
So, your kids' nervous systems are absorbing whatever is happening between the two of you, whether you think they are or not, whether you think that you're showing them kids, they're not dumb. They're actually really smart.
this is so interesting. So how will it show up? So let's say, you know, um, for you, for us at home and in school, how will it show up? As a behavior, as how the children will then show up. Um, we think everything's good, but what are some of the signs we could see that maybe it's not as good as we think it is?
Yeah, I think every kid is different, but I'll speak to how it showed up in
Yeah.
my family. So my oldest 2, are a little more closed off. They're not open, they don't love to share, they don't wanna talk about emotions. They're getting better now. We've done a round of therapy with my 16-year-old, my 19-year-old, well, she'll be 19 next month, but she's moved out, so now she calls, and she's starting to open up and talk to us more. But then I look at my 10 and 12-year-old who had a very different experience with me and my husband. And they are very open, they share everything. The same age, we're not. They were closed
Uh,
off, they didn't wanna talk about anything, they didn't are they talking to you? Do they bring things to you? Are you a safe person for them or not? So I think that's one way
uh,
to look at it. Because another way to look at it is it could just be their own experiences and journey and how they're interpreting and processing things as well in the world as a whole, at school,
the
and all of
bar.
that. So I don't know that there's necessarily like a certain behavior to look for, but I would just ask your to
Mm.
change.
Yeah. So one of the really important things, just a little bit of an interlude here, is we having these conversations and we are bringing them from the lens of the heart. And then we also, we want to broaden it out to look at the community, what kind of children are we worker can have a little bit of an understanding of how we're not saying there's anything right or wrong with modern, relationships, but just how, and Amanda is a really, really key word here, they were more open, right? So it's interesting that, that openness between mom and dad creates a more open child. Yeah. Because, and I'm going to say that again, the kids felt safe. So safety creates openness. And then also knowing that, so some of these behaviors, and, we're not qualified here to start making judgments about how they'll turn up in the classroom and things like this. But these are some really important keywords, for us to kind of like just bear in mind. So, um, a quiet house, so in the village, if we just bring this in, a quiet house is generations may not agree. Yes, some elders may say marriage is not about happiness every day. You stay, you endure, you dig in, and you build. And younger people may say, nope, I refuse to disappear. And, Amanda, you called to that, where I say, I refuse to disappear inside a relationship just to prove I am loyal. Kind of refuse to keep my mouth shut and suffer in silence. But do both sides have something to teach us? And
Yeah, I think So you're asking, it like cut out for half a
You know, the
second.
old,
So you're
the
asking,
old days. So yeah, so
yeah,
I was brought up
we
with,
stick it
you
out.
know, we stick it out. Yeah, it doesn't matter. We endure, just do your bit, do your thing, let him do his thing. And, the most important thing is you're married. You're so and so's wife and you're so and so's husband. And, you and I, we sound like we're kind of coming from a similar situation. And it's really interesting. We were brought up in very, very different backgrounds. You were brought up in America, I was brought up in Africa. It's kind of similar ages, but then we still believe that we want to be co-creators in that marriage, right? So that's kind of like the conversation that has come up here, and there should be an element of happiness in a marriage, right? But is there something both sides are missing from this? Are we missing something, Amanda, from our interpretation?
No, I think that people want to believe that relationships should be sunshine and skittles and happiness all the time. And if we look at, maybe rom-coms or Disney movies, it teaches us to find our prince and live happily ever after. And that's just BS. It doesn't exist. Relationships, this is where a lot of people get hung up is you're so happy. And this is where I always get hung up because I'm like, you spend so much time and money planning your wedding, but you don't spend any time or money planning your marriage. What is
Mm,
that going to be like? Conversations about the future and how many kids do you want? But it's like, how are we going to handle conflict? Do you like how you handled conflict honeymoon phase and you never went through conflict while you were dating and the relationship moved
mhm.
super fast? So I think
Yeah.
that's
What
something
are
to
your
look at because,
values? A really important question to ask. What are your common values? We go into relationships trying to change the person, rather than just observe and see, do you share the common value?
yeah, yep. So I think we need to talk about more of those things during the dating phase. You need to go through a few cycles of conflict to see how do they handle conflict. Do you feel okay bringing things up if he said something hurtful or made a joke? Do you feel comfortable saying, "Hey babe, when you said that, that really didn't feel very good to me." And when you did bring that up, how did he respond? Our cycles of conflict, well, harmony, disharmony, and repair. So harmony, conflict, and repair. But if you don't have repair, you don't ever come back to harmony because what oftentimes happens is a woman will bring something up, he will get defensive or dismissive or have a whole different opinion on it. She'll kind of shut down, or the conversation will then, let's talk about tone for a second. It's like she
Mm,
brings something up and he's like, "Well, you didn't have to say it like that. Gosh, that makes me feel bad now." And suddenly she's
mm,
like, "Babe, I didn't mean it like that. I was just trying to let you know that." And now we're on a different conversation. And so the original issue that she brought up never gets repaired. It gets swept back under the rug. And then you kind of move forward like things are normal. But really, what's happening inside of her is resentment is growing. And this can go both ways. I typically coach women, so this can go both ways. But um, so, yeah, you bring
But
something up
what
to your
are you
partner.
saying, that it's more likely that the woman will capitulate when it comes to conflict? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. And we also have to look at how the women tend to bring things up because sometimes women, we never were taught how to communicate. We never were taught very many relational skills. I don't know why we don't teach this in schools again, because we're in relationships our whole life with friends, with our partners, with family. We're in relationships. And why we don't have like a relational skills class, I don't know. But
Or even
the
a
woman
whole
is the one.
curriculum around relationships, isn't it? Because we say we're creating adults who go out to work. We want high functioning members of society. And there then be curriculums just aligned to relationship, and, you know, just as importantly as maths and English. Where is
Yes.
there space in the curriculum for that?
Yeah. I think that should be more important. Hey, babe, this isn't working for me anymore. We need to sit down and like discuss how we can better handle this. so that moving forward, it feels better for both of us. Like, I always look at it from the lens of what's going to benefit the relationship as a whole, but in a way that you both feel good being in the relationship. And what I will say is then you
Yeah.
find more joy and happiness on the other side of that more often than you do the conflict.
Mm. So the advice is dangerous if, that kind of stick your heels in, or, the other side of that, I have to always get my word in. Both advice can be dangerous if we kind of ignore that emotional relatability. It's not always the right time to bring things up, for example. Not everything has to be brought up. Um,
Yeah.
what I'm hearing, it's a little bit of a balance. So is there room for sticking in and fighting, and how do you know? And then also there's something that you asked there, that you say there, Amanda, if I can just maybe s- uh, ask you a follow-up question on that, which was, the issue is brought and discussed. How about the times where a lot of people will say, yeah, I have brought this issue, we have had the discussion, the same thing still keeps coming up.
Then you don't have repair. So when we
Mm,
bring something up to our partner, it's, and the rule here is one person, one problem, one day. So a
mm,
lot of times what will also happen is you'll bring something up to your partner and he'll be like, well, last week you, and now we're on another conversation again. And this thing, so it's like you drive up to a customer service window. The customer service agent comes up and they're like, well, I have a broken toaster. You're like, well, I don't care about your broken toaster. I want my microwave fixed, right? And so when we bring something up to our partner with something else, we're not going to be in a place to even hear that. We don't even want to
mm,
listen because we have our thing that we want solved here. And so we solve this thing here. They can bring that up tomorrow. Like, so remembering that
mm,
repair is like a one-way street. So this is what keeps you on track. And then something else that I also teach clients to do is, hey, babe, I have something that I want to run by you. Is now a good time to talk? So just getting that verbal yes from your partner will go a long ways. And then can we talk about, okay, how do we bring it up now? Now we're getting into, are we emotionally dumping onto our partner, or are we
mm,
being a little more skillful about it? So, hey, babe, when the other night, and you kind of talk about it as like a camera would record it. So it's like, hey, babe, the other night
mm.
when, and then you can see how he just handles that, right? We could stop there and
What
see how
what
he
if he
handles
goes
that.
like, what if he goes like, yeah, but you always do that?
If
And he
I
says,
do
I don't want
that,
to
I
talk
can look
about
at
it.
that. Yeah, if I do that, I'll look at that. But right now, I
Yeah.
want to discuss this. And so we have to have a full repair cycle. So the end of the repair cycle would be your partner changing behavior. That is repair. If they're not changing
Mm,
behavior, we can bring in some boundaries around that until we get the repair. So there's a lot of you're stacking resentment. They're not changing behavior. So it's like, what is the new approach we can take to this to see if we can influence our partner's behavior? And that just say every
no,
time, maybe, wait, you go.
I was going to ask now, should behavior change be something that you dictate to them? Yeah. I need you to do X from them.
Yeah, I think it can be both. I think that something in repair. So when you get to there's like 4 steps of repair. So one is like you state what happened. Step 2 is this is the story I make
And
up
that's the
about
person
this.
bringing it. Sorry, Amanda. That's the person bringing it up.
Good.
They need to state what
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So
So you
they
state,
have a responsibility.
yeah. So you state what happened. You say, this is the story I make up about it. So let's just say that maybe your husband stayed late at work. He didn't let you know you were cooking dinner and his dinner got cold or something. So,
Hmm.
hey, babe, the other night you were 2 hours late getting home from work. The story I make up about that. And let's just say he comes home and then he's mad that dinner's cold. He's mad dinner's cold. We'll just make up a hypothetical. The story I make up about that is that you don't take me into consideration. You're a
Mm,
jerk. and something else, right? This is where, because we make up these stories in our heads all day long about each other.
Yeah.
So then we continue. So step 3 is like the way that I feel. So then we lead with feelings is like, I feel lonely. And quite frankly, I'm pissed off. And then we ask for the repair. So this is where we get to ask for a clear request. So what I need from
Mhm.
you is first an apology. It's going to feel really weird. This is like where we weren't taught these skills, right? It felt really weird. I like wanted to vomit the first time I asked my husband for an apology. I was like, this is so uncomfortable right now. Like, this is
Why
so
is that
weird.
then?
Like,
Yeah, how?
I think because as women, at least for me in my case, you're taught
Mm,
to, your needs don't matter. Put everyone else's needs ahead of your own. So then being like,
that's
babe, I need you to
interesting.
apologize to me. Ask for an apology and you say, I need you to, and you give him very specific logical steps on what he can do. Or my husband and I are like to the point now where I can say, I need you to let me know what you're going to do to make sure this doesn't keep happening. And then he
Mm,
has to do a little bit of work to be like, okay, here's my pattern. Here's what I'm doing. Okay, here's what I can do to stop this pattern from continuing to happen over and over and over
um,
again. So you can do it both ways. You can make a clear request. This is the action, the behavior change I need to see from you. And then you eventually hit a point where you're like, I'm done kind of spoon feeding you. You've got enough knowledge
oh,
about me now, and I've made my clear requests enough that maybe you could figure some of this out. So I need to know what
yeah,
you're going to do
yeah, you need
to
to
make
kind of
sure this
like
doesn't
work it
continue.
out. So, Amanda, do you think that when are able to communicate it, or both of you learn this before you communicate? So you, it sounds to me like a completely different alphabetic.
Each of you plays a role in that pattern. You each have a part. So pretend it's like a play that you keep acting out the same scene over and over. You each have a role.
Groundhog Day.
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm,
So when one person changes the role, the entire pattern breaks. So you don't have to wait for your husband to change first or for your wife to change first. When you give them something different to respond to, the entire pattern will change. That's how I've done it in my whole marriage. I changed the
mm.
whole relationship over 19 years before my husband even decided to get a coach.
Very interesting. Yeah. So if I was to ask you a question then, so if we just look back from, kind of the journey we've taken so far. So we started by saying relationships are very different. There's this idea where people actually choose to stay in a marriage for the sake of their kids. Yeah. I'd much rather, but then we have modern relationships where, people want to be heard, people want to communicate. Let's say you've tried all. Okay, before you even get to that, we say when selecting a relationship, we need to put in the work in planning the marriage, yeah, planning the long haul, not just planning the day, yeah, the wedding, but actually a proper plan where you're going to look at shared values, communication, ability to repair. So you need to do the work up front. And if you haven't done the work up front, just be aware that you might have a lot more work to do on the other side of things, isn't it? And you don't wait for both sides. Now, that actually I never did that work. And this person, we're completely different. We will never, ever have shared values because they're just completely different person. How do we have that talk so that, I need to leave? And how do we have that
Yeah.
confidence that kids will be okay?
Yeah. Well, staying is hard on the kids, leaving is hard on the kids. So it's all
Mm,
going to be hard. They're already having a hard time if you're staying in a relationship that doesn't feel good to you. They're going to have a hard time
yeah.
if you separate. And so I think the biggest
Mm,
thing to have that conversation is like, I don't know if we're, and I mean, I feel like I've gone through a lot of marriages in my own marriage, but we've lived a lot of different lives in my own marriage. We've
mhm,
had these conversations though, and it's like, "Hey babe, this isn't working for me anymore. This isn't a relationship I'm willing to stay in if it continues in the same way." Like
mm,
we have to figure it out. And if we're never going to share values, my husband and I had to look at that too. Are we going in the same direction in life? Do we life? And we
Mm.
revisit that every year. We look at it. Are we still headed in the same direction? Do we still want the same things? Are we still enjoying being together? Do we, what do we want? What do you see in your future? Here's what I see in my future. And then you get to decide. But I think the biggest thing is, I think a lot of us use our kids as an excuse to hold the marriage together. And I think we need to let
Mm.
go of that, because I honestly think that a woman has a fear of giving herself what she wants. We're told to put everyone else ahead of our own needs and our own desires. And so if this relationship is not fulfilling, if it's not healthy, if it's not what we want, why can't that just be enough? Because when we blame the kids and then stay, now we're going to get resentful toward the kids or toward our partner or toward feeling stuck. Now we feel stuck. We always have our own choice and our own power. And so we get to decide, what might it look like? I have a friend who they have a very amicable separation. She actually still hangs out with her ex-husband. He has now become best friends with her new fiance. Like, they have a beautiful relationship and they're with the kids every day. And I think there's this conception that because we become co-parents and we separate, there's going to be all this turmoil and we have to fight all the time. And I think that we mentally prep ourselves for that. I think if we look at, what if you actually gave your kids a better version of you being separated than you did together? And they get to see the best of you, and you can still be friends with your ex. And there's so many possibilities, but I think that we all have this stigma around divorce as being like so horrible for the kids, and then we're going to get divorced as soon as they're out of the house. And it's like, you have given up a lot of your life to do that. And what if they get a better version of you if you don't? But I
Mm.
think
I
women have
suppose it's
such a
that
fear.
unknown, isn't it? It's that unknown. It's the, if you stay together, they can stay in a different room. You see each other different times. You keep the conflict as minimum as, like, just get it to the other side. And there's the financial element of it as well, isn't it? There's a lot of them, um, you know, the house, and there's all sorts of nuances around that. Um, but at the end of the day, let's look at the community. If the kids are brought up in a two-parent household for the community,
I think it depends on what's happening inside the home. If you have a lot of abuse in
well,
the home, or you have a partner who never hears your wants or needs, if you are happy, if you would be happy, this is how I always put it, if you would be happy if your kids created the exact same relationship you have now, perfect.
well,
If you would not be happy,
well,
change it. Change it or figure it out. But if you have a lot of abuse in the home and it's very toxic, no, I don't think it's better for the kids to stay in a two-parent household.
in a two-parent
I think
household,
it's,
don't just do,
yeah,
you know, yes, some homes are kept together, for that kind of outside, how it looks good on outside. But then it will leak eventually, won't it? It'll leak in the community, it will leak in school. So we need to ask then, like Amanda, you said, um, is it worth staying if you're going to have that relationship where you would rather your children not have? Now,
yeah.
Amanda, we have a letter from someone in our village. They wrote in. I'm going to read that out, and they've said, "We're going to solve this together right now. So dear auntie, my husband and my wife, we don't fight, we don't love each other. Sorry, it's not very well. We don't fight, we don't love each other, but we are together because of the kids. We don't."
Choose your own happiness. And if you want to let your
Oh,
kids see you choosing yourselves, what if you, and I'm not saying choose one or the other. I think a good relational reckoning question is, am I getting enough out of this relationship to make it worth the pain of what I'm not getting, or to make it worth the
oh,
grief of what I'm not getting? That's a really good question to ask yourself. And so I think if
Oh,
you can just open your mind to all possibilities, is this a relationship that you want your kids to create in the future? If that's a no, what do you want to do about it? And could you try a new approach where you're at right now? Because again, I was the dig your heels in girl. I was the girl who doesn't get divorced because my
mm,
mom was divorced twice. And I was the I'm going to dig my heels in and I'm going to fight my way through this. And we're here now. Would I have gone through it as long as I did? It was a long time. I put myself on the back burner for a long time. But I know that now I'm here trying a new approach was so worth it for me. What if you could bring that fire and that passion back into your relationship? Again, I don't have the full context of the relationship aside from what was just said, but you can look
yeah.
at it that way, or you can look at it as what if we did separate and we found we had a more joyous relationship with them, and now we're modeling that to the kids. Approach
Wow,
and see
wow,
what
wow,
happens in the relationship that you're already in.
wow. Mm. So what I'm hearing there is either way, you've got to make a decision. If you stay, you've got to make a decision, and if you leave, you've got to make a decision. There's no neutrality, and the kids are going to be better for it. Kids absorb the energy, so you might not necessarily have to say anything. And what I would add to that, it's heavy. It's a really heavy thing, and it will show up. It will show up in you might get ill, or the body keeps score. I read this book once. Is the body keeps score. So you might think, yeah, we're fine. We've got a good house or whatever it is, and then the kids are fed, and the kids see mom and dad in the same house, but it will leak through, and it will leak through to the kids as well, right? So they might look like they're performing, or they're doing okay, or they're doing great in school, but it will leak through in ways that we might not be aware of. So let's just think about the long-term effect in the community, in all this. Amanda, maybe we can help them decide whether they stay or leave. So those questions are, ask themselves, do we still love each other? Can we rebuild? And what environment is actually healthiest for the children? Amanda, how would you help them?
Do we love each
So
other?
how do we know
Yeah.
whether we love each other? That's a really, it sounds really straightforward, but it's a really hard question.
Love is a verb, love is an action. So, how
Mm,
do we cherish each other? How do we take care of each other? How do we make each other's lives even better for the relationship as a whole? And so, because what I believe is that if you're still together, you probably care deeply about each other. A good question to ask yourself is sometimes what happens is when resentment comes in, we have resentment goggles on. So then our partners
mm.
kind of look like the annoying little brother or little sister. And so we think, oh my gosh, I don't even love this person. Like I'm kind of repulsed by them or disgusted. Like, oh my gosh, like, because who would want to be intimate with their little brother or sister, right? So
Yeah, the
I think
worst.
that yeah. So I think if we look at it that way, it's like, have we fallen out of love, or are we just feeling some sort of way because maybe there's resentment on both sides, one or both sides? And that's what's causing us to feel that way. So then we could take
Okay,
those resentment goggles off
mm,
and look at what's here.
so what we need to do is ask that question, what's the ongoing things? Yeah. So what you say there, like love is a verb. I love that. Love is a verb. Yeah. So the second question is, can we rebuild?
Yeah. And again, I don't know the full context, but I think that there's always the opportunity for maybe not always. This is not, we got to put the little disclaimer. It's not for abusive situations. Like if you're physically
Yes.
abused, that is first and foremost. The most important is your physical safety, and there's no rebuilding there. Um, but can we rebuild? Yes. And a lot of things that we can rebuild is as long as there's no active addiction in place. So, like for me and my husband, he needed to get his alcohol under control and on our relationship itself. And so that's the first
Because
piece to
there's a
look at.
layer.
Yeah,
Mm,
there's layers. And
mm,
so, but then can we try a new approach? So let's just say that it's just you're not liking how things are running in the house, and maybe he's a little disrespectful towards you, maybe he dismisses or minimizes or has some of those things, then yeah, we can start to rebuild. We can start to set boundaries. We can start to look at how each of you are showing up in that dance that you're both in and how we can shift the roles that you play in that and change the whole dynamic of your relationship and then make a decision from that.
which is what environment is healthy, right? So don't be in a rush, do not pretend, if, yeah, so that was, if it's an abusive relationship, no, yeah, because the kids are going to be learning that as well, and they'll be taking it. You might show up in the school playground, yeah, it might show up. What's the emotional climate? Amanda, you said something powerful there, that women, how we're taught that if I say something, he'll fight or he'll leave. Or what was the third one again, Amanda?
He'll collapse. He'll essentially shut down, or he'll fall
He won't be able to
apart and it's going to be
function.
all my fault. Yeah.
Oh, my fault. And then finally, think about the children's emotional safety in that environment. Yeah. We always think, on the physical side of things, but also think about the emotional safety of living in that environment. So I want to speak directly to the idea of staying for the kids. Many parents usually say that with love, we're staying for the kids. They mean, I don't want to break their home, but sometimes children can feel the coldness even when nobody is shouting. And that will show up in different ways. Either they'll be, we're then getting into lots of different things like attachment with this. Um, for anybody who's tuning in today, navigating some of this.
I would love to leave them with you're not asking for too much if you want an amazing relationship. You get to have what you want, but you do have to put the work in to get there. And I don't mean abandoning yourself and putting yourself last to get to where you want. I'm talking about both of you speaking your truth.
Fantastic fight, right? So fight for each other.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I would like to never think of, and maybe might be useful to think of, staying together means you're making the children responsible for holding your marriage together. Right? You're making the children the ones who are ultimately, making that decision for you, which we normally don't think about. Children are not glue. If there is no fighting, that does not mean that they may still not be enough calm in how they feel, calm enough to know that it's okay to have an honest relationship, especially around relationships when they do end up having their own relationships. So it's kind of almost like a modeling by um you use a really powerful word there, like that internal regulation, Amanda, right? Deep down, they're learning, without even knowing that they're learning, that's how you communicate. I'll stay and fight if you're staying, or find a gentle way to leave. Get help sometimes if both are investing in it, or like Amanda said, sometimes it's just one person who's going to invest in it and just be there for the long haul, but you need to see the other person actually putting in some work, maybe to change something, if it's something that's personal to them. Yeah. So a big one today. Our first episode, our first village conversation has been quite a heavy one, but that's what we do in the village. That's what the so now, Amanda, we've got this thing in our in our series, in our episodes that we call the rapid fire section. So I have
Oh
got some
boy.
questions.
Very toxic family. So,
Yeah.
me,
So you
um,
so,
so I
you didn't have an auntie figure.
no, I would say my friends' moms were probably
Yeah. Like yeah. Don't forget to reach out to them and say thank you. That's a big thing to have done, isn't it? Being the auntie figure. One piece of advice you wish you'd been given earlier.
oh, don't care what anyone else thinks.
I love that. The thing the younger generation gets right that we don't admit.
That the other generation gets right.
Gen
Generation.
Alpha.
Boy, I think that they own who they are a lot quicker. And I think that we're maybe not even afraid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then we say it.
I think we're
Yeah.
afraid to admit that their assertiveness actually isn't a terrible thing.
Yeah. So they're more assertive. And we've had to kind of learn that. The old way that still stands up for you?
An old what?
Yeah, the old way that still stands out.
That still stands up for me.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? I
I thought
wasn't
I'd
I
love
was did I
to.
look frozen? Oh my gosh. I don't know. One thing that popped into my head is like chivalry is dead. What's another way of saying that?
I think I know. Dig your heels in
That's true. That's true. I probably wouldn't dig them in as deep these days.
for love in the right circumstances and the right environment. Okay,
Yeah.
last one. A bit easier. Finish this sentence. It takes a village to.
Oh my gosh. Live an amazing life.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And what a way for us to bring this to the end. Okay, so the first thing that has landed for me today, Amanda, is relationships. I think if there's little ones that have been brought into the equation, they will go out there, they're going to the community, they're going to the schools. So we are a village. And I love that. It takes a village to live an amazing life. So, Amanda, where can people find out more about your work? Where can we follow you? Where can we stalk you in a good way? Yeah.
Yeah, I hang out mostly on Instagram at
Yeah.
its.amandaclark. I
Yeah.
also have my own podcast, No More Good Girl,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
we undo all the good girl conditioning we were all taught. And then
Yeah.
I have an incredible membership called The Deeply Loved Woman that you can also find on my website at amandaclark.biz. So those are
Wow. Lovely.
probably the three places I hang out the most.
Fantastic.
Or
And Amanda,
TikTok.
thank you.
TikTok.
Oh, TikTok. Oh, TikTok. Where we
I do
found each
piss
other.
people off on TikTok.
It's
But that
okay.
is
That's what the village
how
is
I
there
was
for.
found.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. We're learning from
Yeah.
the other generation. We've got to be assertive, even on TikTok.
Yes. Yes.
So Amanda, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for helping us to slow down, to hold that middle ground, and because not every marriage needs to end quickly, to look at the things we need to do to build strong marriages and strong relationships instead of pretending that we are part of one. So today the village did what the village is meant to do. We did not shame. We just talked openly. We didn't romanticize the struggle. We said it as it is, and we didn't throw away commitment. We sat under the proverbial tree and told the truth about what we see in our way around modern marriages changing and how to love honestly. So I'd like to ask you to subscribe, follow Amanda. Lovely, lovely things going on in Amanda's community. Tell your auntie about us. We're here every Thursday at 12:30. And thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for listening. And thank you so much for joining. Call Me Auntie is here. And until next time, the village is talking. Make sure you're listening. Let's help us to pull up a chair and talk. Thank you so much. And bye for now.